Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our final webinar series. Let me just go ahead and share my screen real quick, and we'll give it a few seconds just to let some more people in here, and then we'll get going. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about mock servers, utilities, and integrations. We already covered integrations briefly in a previous webinar, so that will be a rather brief section of today's talk. Let's go ahead and dive into mock servers. So this was a talk given originally by our lovely dev evangelist, Joyce Lynn. So we're going to talk about what mock servers are. Now, a mock server is a fake API that simulates a server response. So what exactly are mock servers used for? From API design to development to testing, the ability to create a fake server response is a really powerful tool. I know that previously in development, when I've been working on APIs, especially across teams or across companies, sometimes another team doesn't have the full product that you're going to be relying on ready. However, you already know what a response might look like. In those cases, it can be really helpful to create something like a mock so that you can continue working on your piece of the project while they get theirs up and running. That's an example of how API development can be really helped by mocks. In terms of API design, when you're first deciding how you want an API to work, it's good to play around and see what benefits different designs have. You don't always have the time or necessarily the patience to go ahead and create an entire API infrastructure every time you want to try a different idea. So having a mock is a good way to play around. API testing is another way that mocks can be used. When you're seeing how your API reacts and works with other APIs of different sorts, or how one of your services responds to different returns, it can be really good to, say, use a mock to simulate an error response rather than either relying on the other party or going into your own API and actually generating an error. In addition, you can also use mocks for doing things like designing a website. If you know that as a web developer, you're going to be relying on certain information from an API, you can go ahead and create a mock that sends that information before the API is actually set up. So in general, mocks are a really good way to quickly develop and design things without actually having to set up the full infrastructure. So let's talk about setting up mock servers. There are a few different things that you have to do when you create a mock, and we'll walk through those in just a minute. First, you have to set up your mock server and choose what response you want to be sending. Next, you need to update that response. And finally, you can also create multiple responses. Let's take a look at that. So we're in my workspace here, and we're going to go ahead, click on the new button, go ahead and click on a mock. So the way that mocks work is you're actually setting a URL path. So in this case, we're going to set our path to example. You can choose a response code and a response body. So in this case, we're going to say our response body is, oops, sorry. It worked. You see here that there are actually other things there. So I'm going to say bad example. Set this response to a 400 and then say didn't work. So we've just set up our webinar example mock. You do have the option to use an environment, but that will come into more complex projects. And then you can also decide to make the mock server private. One thing to note is that when you create a mock server, we actually host it publicly for you. This is a really awesome tool, especially when you're working across teams, because you don't have to, each team doesn't have to create their own mock. You guys can rely on your own mocks or one single mock for your entire workflow. However, if you want your mock to only be available to certain people, you can click this button and it'll only work for people who have your login credentials or your permissions. Mocks are also governed in terms of the number of calls you can make to them by some usage limits in the same way that monitors in the Postman API are. Cool. So now we've created our mock, and at the same time, it's created a collection. Here we go. We have actually a URL here that we can go ahead and start calling. So let's look at this. We are in webinar example mock. We have 2 requests. Here we go. It's actually created an environment for us as well. So this environment, if you look at it, is really only holding that URL that we saw generated. We can go ahead and click send, and we see that it worked, is now being returned by our mock server. Let's see what happens when we say bad example. It didn't work. And you can see that we get that 400 bad request, and we get a response. So how can we go ahead and edit the mock after it's been created? Well, mocks are really cool since they're powered off of the example responses that we saw earlier in previous webinars. You might remember examples from just documenting your APIs to show example responses that you can expect, or from just in general our first walkthrough of the anatomy of a request. So let's go ahead and look at our default example. So here we can see sorry, one second. We're actually going to create a second example body. Here, we're going to call this new example. And we're going to call this example new. So, and we're going to change that response to this is a new example. We're going to save it. Let's go back, hit example new. Now we see that we have a new example. So using response examples, you can actually create new endpoints for your mock. Mocks aren't just limited to simple plain text. You have the headers that are returned here. And in addition, you could do things like generate and send entire JSON. There's actually a great article that was just posted on Medium by our evangelist Joyce that goes into how you can use the Postman API in combination with mocks to create dynamic mocking. And we'll go ahead and post that up in the Zoom chat. I'm going to take a pause here just for a second and see if anyone has any questions about what we've reviewed. Okay, cool. So it looks like we didn't have any questions there. Mocks are pretty straightforward, which is a really awesome part of this functionality. We had a question from Steve asking if it's really the responses at this time that matter and not the request. That is correct, Steve. So if you hit that sample endpoint and you have already saved that response, then it will come back the way you want it to. I would encourage peeking into that article a little bit more to see how you can build out a little more dynamic functionality. I know some people have done some really cool stuff like host HTML pages on their mocks, which is a cool way of creating a basic website. So that's one thing I would encourage you to check out. And using that Postman API, you can get a little bit deeper so that you could maybe have some dynamic requests and responses. So setting up the mock server. Oh, yeah. So setting up the mock server, we saw that we just click through the new button. We look at the requirements. You can also, it creates a collection, request, environment, and variable. You just need that unique path URL and our example body. We saw that we can update examples by changing URL path. We can change the headers. We can even change the response status and the response body, all through that example response. And then we also saw that we can have multiple examples with different URL paths. Now, the best practice for this is to use unique URL paths, but as you can see in the article that we posted, there are other ways as well. So summarizing mocks, we talked about setting up, updating, and creating mocks and responses. We talked about the unique URL path and example response bodies as must-haves for mocks. And we used example responses to represent a variety of different responses that you could get back from your mock server. That's mocks for you. And next we're going to be moving on and talking about Postman utilities. I'll give everyone a second just to see if they want to ask any more questions about mocks before we move. Okay, excellent. Looks like we didn't have any more questions about mocks. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into Postman Utilities, which was originally presented by yours truly at the PostCon workshop. So one thing that we have available in utilities is templates. Using the new button, we can click in and actually access templates. So these are things that you set up and they pop right into your workspace. Here you see in this example that Health Check actually has created a collection with a request, and it additionally created a monitor. If we go back through that and pop into the app real quick, I will walk you through just how templates can be easily snagged. So one thing that is good to know is the new button pretty much holds everything that you'll ever want to pull in and create in Postman. So this mocks fake it till you make it is a really good template. Actually, it is for that article we just posted. So if you go ahead and snag this template, it'll pull down everything you need to experiment with mocks and the Postman API. Other templates include different starter projects. So templates are a really good way to just sort of, we have them organized even into some different DevOps, developer, and reference sections. These are good ways to start out your projects and get some functionality into Postman before you actually start customizing and building your stuff. I would encourage you to check out the templates and really start messing around with some of them because they're a pretty powerful tool and not many people leverage them fully. Next up, we have cookies. So cookies are grouped by domain. They behave exactly like a browser cookie. And for APIs with cookie-based session authentication, this is really what you want to use. Let's take a look. You click on this cookie button up here, and you can type in your URL. It allows you to add a cookie. It'll auto-generate some text. And you can go ahead and save that. Now, you can reference cookies, either in the header or the body, they aren't as commonly used anymore. They were previously for authentication when the web was a little bit younger, and some web APIs will additionally use cookies. And just calling that back, the cookie button is right up here next to the code button under the send request. Go ahead and click into that for you and just show you where it is real quick. As you can see, a lot of different APIs will return cookies, and those will be saved automatically for you. They are organized by domain, and it's a good way to keep track of these things. Next, we're going to talk about client certificates. So these validate clients to servers, and they can't be edited after creation. We create them through the settings menu. You see here, go to settings, certificates. You can actually type in your URL, any files that you might need to upload to use your certificate, and then you can actually remove them if you need to. Let's go ahead and show that in the app. So, oops, sorry, that's proxy. We'll get to that in just a second. So the settings menu, if you haven't explored it at all, is a great way to look at a bunch of different functionality in Postman. We're just going to look at certificates right now. You can click that Add Certificate button. You see that everything we just showed you there. And then let's say FFFFFFF is our passphrase. You add that. And if you'll notice, there is no ability to edit this after it's been created. So make sure that you get it right, because otherwise you'll have to either remove it or just add a new one. Certificates are another thing that was previously more commonly used for authentication. Now we're using more things like OAuth 2.0. Let's talk about proxy. So Postman Proxy is a way to capture live requests. You can optionally save the responses as well. You can save the history to your collections, and you can instantly generate collections off of what you see. It's created through the antenna icon up in the toolbar. The way this basically works is that while your computer is accessing the web, your browser or any other app you might be using is constantly sending requests to APIs and out into the internet. Postman Proxy just steps in between and monitors them. It's a cool way to actually grab some functionality from the actual web and pull some requests that are real and real time into your Postman collections. Before we get on to API search, I'll just show you where that is in the app. And we do have some documentation online that will show you how to use it. See, collection webinar. You can connect your proxy, and then from there, it will start to save responses. Let's talk about API search. So this is a pro and enterprise feature. It basically is a way for, if you're anything like me, you might have a massive personal workspace, or if you're working in a very large team workspace, there can be a lot, and you might not remember exactly where that request is that goes and hits the Twitter API and looks for pictures of clowns, but you might be able to go and search for clowns in the API search. So we access this via the magnifying glass in the bottom left, and it will search through folders, collections, environments, globals, and responses. Here we go. Looks like I don't have anything for hello. We had a question about whether or not a monitor, I'm assuming proxy, will work for enterprise APIs, which are not public APIs, but only available within the enterprise network. I'm not exactly sure about that question. If you could clarify a little bit, that would be extremely helpful. But in terms of proxy, anything that is coming in or out of your computer should be accessible, unless it's behind some sort of security protocol. In terms of API search, for things that are only available within your enterprise network, if you're talking about enterprise teams, you can only search within a workspace. So if I'm going to switch to this team workspace here, we'll look at, just this team workspace. Take a second to switch over because it's a really big team, and then we can say, now you see that we actually have 67 collections that contain the word hello and 35 environments. we can actually filter it to say, well, I know that only the name of my collection had hello in it. So now we see that, well, looks like it's reassessed itself. It looks like it's lagging a little bit right now, but this will effectively allow you to search those individual fields. You can also specify specific collections or within a specific collection. So I can look in here. There are no collections in there. You can also look at environments and globals. So I would encourage you to check out API search if you do have either the Pro trial, Pro, or Enterprise licensing. And then the last thing we'll talk about is just enterprise security. So when you do purchase Enterprise or have the licensing, there are a few extra security features that exist. You get access to single sign-on, which is pretty well requested across most enterprise customers, looking for one point of access for all of their employees. It's pretty standard industry practice, and it's available through Postman Enterprise. You also get access to audit logs, which let you review key activities like security, billing, anything to do with team management and size. It'll allow you to add or update team members, really just get really deep visibility into what everyone is doing on your Postman accounts. And finally, for the static IP, some customers with lockdown private enterprise networks need to reserve certain IPs to be able to access consistently. So static IPs will allow you to do that by reserving those IPs and consistently keeping that open. So in summary, we've talked about Postman utilities. Most of our additional features can be accessed via the settings menu, the new button menu, or the new button menu. With Pro and Enterprise, you can search every item in the app, and with Enterprise, you get some more in-depth security features. I'll pause here for a second and leave it open for questions. So we had a question about if we have questions and need technical help, what is the correct way to ask for help? Is it the Postman blog? And I can say it's not the Postman blog. We have a Postman discourse community that we will post in the chat, and we encourage you to go there to look for help. There are a lot of really active users there that will help you out. Both me and Joyce as dev evangelists are on there looking to help. You can really go there for any sort of information you need. In addition, we do have documentation, YouTube series, blogs, pretty much an entire library of information available that I encourage you to check out. If you think you've encountered a bug or you have a feature request, please check us out on GitHub. And finally, we do have a help center that we'll be posting a link to in the chat. So moving on, we're just going to talk about some additional resources that will help you as you move on in your Postman journey. This was originally presented by Joyce Lynn. So we've just talked about all of the docs, the discourse forum, the blog, YouTube. I called out the GitHub issues. We do have an open roadmap on Trello, and there are a few other references that will pop up in and around the web that are often pointed to via our blog series. And we'll go ahead and post links to, well, I believe we've posted links to most of that, but we've just posted links to the discourse forum. You guys know where the docs and blog are. We'll go ahead and throw up a link to the GitHub issues. and the Trello roadmap. So like we said, the docs are just getpostman.com/docs. The forum is the discourse that we've just linked. Good way to get help. That blog has a lot of information on how to do different things. You can also check the Medium blog that we posted earlier, where there'll be more in-depth technical content coming out. That is for, a little higher level usage of Postman on an industry scale. You should be familiar with YouTube by now. We have a great series of recreations of the workshop talks, as well as all of our webinars are also hosted there. The GitHub issues, as we said, all of our issue tracking is hosted publicly on GitHub. So go and see if your bug has been noted. If it has, then go ahead and throw a comment up there, just letting people know that you're experiencing the same thing. If it hasn't, you can go ahead and submit an issue. Or if you just have something you want to see in Postman, we do accept feature requests as well. We're always keeping in touch with our community, and we want to hear what you think makes Postman a great app and what you think will make it better. And then finally, we have this roadmap for developers. That is a good way to see what's coming up in terms of Postman features. That we keep that updated, and you can look to it every time you need to see, what can I expect to see out of Postman in the next month or so. There are a few more references that I'd call out. If you want to use the Postman API, it's docs.api.getpostman.com. Same thing with Postman Echo. It's docs.postmanecho.com. And then we do have a Postman Collections SDK, which is hosted at postmanlabs.com/Postman Collection. Finally, in terms of the even more references, you can go ahead and Google Postman Runtime, check out our GitHub at postmanlabs/Newman, and then there are references to using Markdown as well that are scattered on the blog. So that about wraps it up for our final webinar. Oh, sorry, we'll talk about integrations just really quickly. Although we have gone over them just a little bit, we'll cover them one more time. And then we will go ahead and close things out. So if you have any other questions, please post them in the chat. Otherwise, just hang on. So, and we have a question about whether or not the webinar is available for everyone. It is publicly available on YouTube. It just takes us a little bit of time to get the most recent episode, uploaded. So, but you can see the entire series up to this point online as well. So integrations, why they matter. They're helpful for facilitating learning, speeding up development, building more complex projects and functionality, and supporting our workflow. This is integrations that are built in are only available through Pro and Enterprise customers. So the examples are GitHub, PagerDuty, Slack. These are really powerful for things like source control, CI/CD, reporting. So I think we've talked about a little bit before for monitoring. Say if your API goes down, you might want to be notified of that via Slack. That's a good way. The Slack integration is a good way to do that. Most of these have out of the box functionality that don't require scripting. We can go ahead and check out one of these integrations real quick. Oops, sorry. Oops, sorry. So you can access the integrations via the dashboard. If you want to get there from the app, you can just go to the integration section of the Browse menu and check it on the web dashboard. So if you only have the free version, Postman API is everything that you'll see here. You can still pull that in and use some of those tutorials to play around with that. Otherwise, you can do things like integrate via Dropbox. So it's pretty simple. All you need to do is add an integration, authorize it, it goes ahead and so I've already been authenticated to Dropbox as that's as my personal email. Whoops. And then you can go ahead and just choose a collection and a file name and then add the integration. So what that'll do is that'll actually save that to your Dropbox. And then you will be able to view that in Dropbox. So that's a good way to back up your work. Most of these integrations can be viewed via the workspace. We go back. You can see the integrations that are currently existing in your workspace. So besides a little bit of setup or authentication, you can go ahead and really pull that functionality right out of the box. So if you're working frequently with APIs, you probably use a few other formats like Swagger or ROML. Through that import button that I think we've previously covered it once, but you're actually able to import folders, files, links, and raw text. And we support ROML, Waddle, Swagger's version 1 and 2, and RunScope. So those are all files that you can import and will be imported as Postman collections. In the future, if you check out that public roadmap, you will see that Swagger v3, also called OpenAPI, is on that list as well. We really care about fully integrating into your API development lifecycle. So this is an extremely important part of Postman that I encourage you to check out. So in summary, integrations are very important. They're really helpful for speeding up your workflow. They're great for pro and enterprise to get some pre-built functionality, and they require minimal configuration without scripting. So we had a question about any updates on schedules and monitors for enterprise network. I'm afraid that I don't have information on that right now, but I would encourage you to reach out via Twitter or check out our Trello board to see what upcoming things are going to be released. I'll go ahead and stop here. This will be the end of today's webinar. Thank you very much for tuning in. This is our final webinar. I'm sad to see you guys go. As always, I am reachable via either you can Twitter at Postman Client or Scottish Kilt, my personal Twitter. And we will always be around to answer questions and really love you guys for being part of our community. So we'll keep it open for just a little bit so you can grab links if you need to. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending.